Hello! Today we will talk about identifying or non-identifying adjective clauses. And this is in our grammar book. It's actually spread throughout the different chapters in the supplement. And it's also within our purple book, and we will start looking at Unit 5, which looks at identifying adjective clauses. So far we have been focusing on identifying adjective clauses. I choose to teach it separate from the way it is explained in the book because in the book I feel like it makes it look like a different rule for each type of adjective clause, and actually it's one rule which applies to all adjective clauses. So we're going to look at this rule, we're going to look at the form, we're going to look at the meaning. To begin, you might want to look on the Canvas page in our adjective clause unit, and there is a handout that looks like this. It has a lot of example sentences on it. You might want to read it or take a look at it before you watch the video. You might want to pause right now and take a look at it, or print it out so that you can make notes on your own paper as you watch the video and follow along. So we're going to start by looking at a couple of example sentences from that handout. And here we are with our two sentences. If I can get it lined up in a good way. Here we are with our two sentences. I'd like you to take a moment and read these two sentences, and I'd like you to make a guess. You can even pause the video if you need to. Think about what the difference is between these two sentences. Is there a difference? So pause the video if you need to. Take a look at the sentence, think about it for a few minutes, and we're going to start looking at it together. In the first one, if we look at number one and number two, in the first one, where is our main clause? Where is the subject of our main clause? Where is the verb of our main clause? We know that we have the girl is in my grammar class. This is the subject, this is the verb. Who is in my grammar class? The girl. If we look at number one, in fact, this whole thing is the subject of this verb. The whole thing is the subject of this verb. This part right here is the adjective which is describing the girl. If we look at number two, is this the same sentence or is it a different sentence? If we look at the function in sentence two, in fact, we have that girl as the subject, and then this is the verb in our main clause. Both sentences have an adjective clause. Both of the sentences have an adjective clause, but actually, the first one, the noun with the adjective clause, is functioning as one thing. It's like an adjective plus a noun. It's working as just one thing. In the second one, we have a noun, and then we get some extra information about the girl. So we still have an adjective clause which is describing girl, but it's extra information because we don't need it in our sentence. We don't need this information. Now, they look the same. How do I know if I need it or if I don't? Well, sometimes it's up to you. Do you want to say the sitting in front of me on the plane girl is in my grammar class? Or do you want to say that girl is in my grammar class? By the way, she's also sitting in front of me on the plane. If we look at the function, there's a difference. This one is what's known as an identifying adjective clause. And this one is non-identifying. Identifying means I need this adjective clause to find out which girl you're talking about. It helps me identify this noun. Non-identifying means I don't need this adjective to find out that girl. Now, on paper, it's a little bit difficult. Which girl? Well, I don't know because it's on paper, it's written. But in real life, I might point and say, that girl over there, the girl sitting over there, who is in front of me on the plane, is in my grammar class. And we can actually see that here we have this demonstrative adjective before girl. It gives us a little bit more information about girl. And so we might not need this extra information about the fact that she's sitting in front of me on the plane. We're going to look at a few more examples, so don't panic yet. If this is a little bit confusing, don't worry. But before we do, let's take a look at our grammar rules. If we're talking about identifying or non-identifying adjective clauses, what do you notice about the form? How do we make identifying or non-identifying adjective clauses? Well, the form is the same as an adjective clause. It has the same form as other adjective clauses, mostly. We're going to get to a few rules in just a minute. But mostly, we have our keyword, we've got a subject, we've got a verb. Or we have a keyword that is working as a subject, and then we have a verb after. So in that way, it's the same form. It's an adjective clause. It's not a new thing. It's still an adjective clause. Another thing is that identifying adjective clause takes no commas. Non-identifying is with commas. So if it does not have commas, it helps us identify the thing. It's necessary information. If it has commas, it means I'm just giving you some extra information. All right, we're going to go back to our paper, and we're going to look at some more examples so we can keep working on this, see if we can figure this out a little bit. Let's take a look at example number 2. Ooh, getting crazy. A book which I read last month said that many people learn to enjoy grammar after they learn another language. Grammar Can Be Fun, which I read last month, said that many people learn to enjoy grammar after they learn another language. In this case, we've got two different sentences. Let's take a look at the punctuation. Which one is identifying and which one is not identifying? Which one is identifying and which one is not identifying or non-identifying? Number 1, this is identifying. Number 2, this is non-identifying. And I can see that by the punctuation. With commas, it means it's extra information. We could even, if we wanted to, we could cover this part of the sentence, this whole thing, and we could say, Grammar Can Be Fun said that many people learn to enjoy grammar after they learn another language. The part in between the commas is between commas because it's extra information. It's not necessary. Why is this underlined? Well, in English, often we underline the title of a book. Usually if it's an article, we use quotations, but if it's a book, we use an underline. So in this case, this is the name of the book, and we should have capital letters here. The name of the book is Grammar Can Be Fun. Do I need to know that I read it last month? Is that necessary for me to find this book? No, it's extra information. It's like saying, the book, Grammar Can Be Fun, said that many people blah, blah, blah. By the way, I read that book last month. But I do not need this adjective clause to help me identify this book. I know the name of the book, so I do not need the adjective clause. In this case, this is the subject, of this verb said. So we have our main clause is this. And the part in between the commas is just extra information. If we look at number 1, we have an identifying adjective clause. When you see an adjective clause without commas, it means I need this information to help identify this noun. It's not just any book. It's not the interesting book. It's not the beautiful book. It's not the most popular book. It's the book which I read last month. We've got an adjective to describe which book, and there's no commas. When I see no commas, I know that this whole thing is one specific book. And this whole thing is the subject for this verb. So we don't say it like this in English, but you could say the I read it last month book. If this were an adjective, again, this is an adjective clause, it functions like an adjective. You could say the read last month book said that blah, blah, blah. You can think of it like an adjective. That's not how we make those adjectives. We usually use a clause after because you can't easily make this into an adjective. So we need it as an adjective clause, but it's a very specific book. Let's take a look at another example. I'd like you to take a minute and think about the difference in meaning. Which one is identifying and which one is non-identifying? Which one is necessary information to help you decide or to help you identify or find sister, and which one is just extra information about sister? Let's take a look. Let's look at the function first. In the first one, is the adjective clause part of the subject or is it separate from the subject? As a matter of fact, this whole thing, the adjective clause plus the noun, is the subject for our main clause verb. In the second one, just the noun is the subject for this main clause verb here. So what's the difference in meaning? Well, first, which one's identifying? This one is identifying because it has no commas, and this one is non-identifying. Now let's think about the meaning a little bit. Why did the writer in number 1 choose no commas? And why did the writer in number 2 choose commas? They're the same sentence. So how does it change the meaning? In number 1, my sister who lives in Chicago, if we think about making this into an adjective, it would be my Chicago sister. What does that tell you about the writer? That tells you I have more than one sister because I have my Chicago sister, I have my Denver sister, I have my Fort Collins sister. So again, this information is needed to identify this. The writer is telling you there are many of these things, my sister, and you need this information to help you identify which of my sisters. In the second one, my sister is a fashion designer. This tells you I have one sister, my sister. You don't need any extra information to help you find which of my sisters because there's only one. And by the way, she lives in Chicago. It's extra information. I'm showing you, the writer is showing you that this is extra. How do you know if you need commas or not? Well, you don't. You have to make a decision as a writer if this adjective clause is necessary for your reader to understand which sister, or if you're just adding in some extra commentary, some extra information about something that we can already identify or find. And as a reader, when you are reading, you need to understand that it's the Chicago sister, not just my sister. You also need to understand that this one means I only have one sister. I can find which sister by just these two words. We're going to look at another example. Geotourism, which works with local economies, is becoming more popular all over the world. Geotourism, which is a type of vacation that works with local economies, is becoming more popular all over the world. In number 1, where is the subject for our main clause verb? This whole thing is the subject for our main clause verb be. So it's not all geotourism, it's a specific local economy geotourism that is becoming more popular. In this case, it's not all geotourism, it's a specific local economy geotourism. This adjective is necessary. If we look at number 2, geotourism is becoming more popular. And in this case, we can see that geotourism is becoming more popular means all geotourism is becoming more popular. What is this doing in this sentence? What is this adjective clause doing? What is it functioning as? It's extra information. In this case, this is a definition to help the reader. Maybe the reader doesn't know what geotourism is. Or maybe I guess. Maybe I don't know if my reader knows what geotourism is. So I added in this extra information, but my main clause is geotourism is becoming more popular. That's my sentence. By the way, in case maybe you don't know what geotourism is, it's a type of vacation that works with local economies. Let's take a look inside of that adjective clause. Did anyone notice that we have another adjective clause there? We have another adjective clause here that works with local economies. Is this adjective clause identifying or non-identifying? It's identifying. And it's identifying which kind of vacation. It's a certain type of vacation. Sure, great. But if you say geotourism is a type of vacation, I say, great, I saw tourism, I know tourism means vacation, you didn't help me. That doesn't help me. We've got this general noun here. So we need this identifying adjective clause to give us more information. It's the local economies, works with local economies vacation. That's what geotourism means. But this adjective clause is just extra information if we look at our main clause. Geotourism is becoming more popular. In this one, your writer specifically means only the local economy geotourism is becoming more popular. So we want to think about this as an adjective, but we also want to think about main clause focus and main clause sentence. I think I've got one more. Globalization is a type of modern phenomenon in which economies in different countries become interdependent. Globalization is a type of modern phenomenon which is now affecting different countries all over the world. Let's look at the information. In the first one, we have our identifying. To give us more information about what kind of phenomenon, which phenomenon. And in the second one, this one is non-identifying, and it's just extra information about phenomenon. This one is defining what kind of phenomenon. This one is just extra information about this phenomenon. By the way, it's now affecting different countries. A phenomenon in which economies in different countries become more interdependent. So in this one, I'm identifying this word phenomenon. I'm taking a general noun and I'm giving a definition for it. And in this one, I have this general noun and I'm just giving you extra information about globalization as a type of modern phenomenon. So we can also see that these identifying adjective clauses can be non-identifying adjective clauses can also be the object in the sentence. When it's at the end of the sentence, it actually becomes unclear if I'm only talking about phenomenon or if I'm talking about this whole thing, by the way, is now affecting different countries. When it's at the end, it can also work as what's called an appositive, and that's when it means it's a comment, an extra comment about the whole situation. When your non-identifying adjective clause is at the end of the sentence, it actually is unclear. It's kind of a problem in English language. It's unclear if this is only about phenomenon or if it's about this whole situation. We'll take a look at a few more of those, but that's something to pay attention to. So in this one, we're getting the definition of this modern phenomenon. It's the different countries become more interdependent modern phenomenon. And in this one, it just says globalization is a modern phenomenon. By the way, it's now affecting different countries all over the world. All right, at the bottom of the page, there are a few more practices. Grammar which is challenging is my favorite thing to study. Imagine, right now it's without commas, so I'd like you to make a note about the meaning without the commas, and then I want you to imagine if we add commas, how does that change the meaning? Grammar which is challenging is my favorite thing to study. In this case, without commas, this whole thing is my subject. So we could say something like, challenging grammar is my favorite. Not all grammar, just the challenging grammar. It's a specific type of grammar. Challenging grammar. Challenging grammar is my favorite. So we could use an adjective clause or we can just use a plain adjective in this one because there's an easy way to make an adjective. If we look back at our second example about the book, we can see that in this one we cannot make an adjective from this adjective clause. So we must keep the adjective clause. But to focus on the meaning here in this example, we could say challenging grammar. And we can see how this whole thing is the subject of this. Similarly, in this sentence, this whole thing is the subject for is my favorite thing to study. Now, if we add commas, I'm going to do that in green. I'm going to put the commas in green so we can kind of keep these separate. If we add commas, then only this is the subject and the rest is just extra. This means, if we add commas, it means grammar is my favorite. Grammar is my favorite thing to study. And it is challenging. But we can see that if we add commas, it takes this adjective clause out of our subject function, and it makes it just an extra comment. This is another way that we could write this. As we know, there are many different ways to write different things. We have lots of options in our language. So you could just make it two separate sentences with a conjunction, or you can add it as a non-identifying adjective clause, which means I'm giving you extra information. Let's look at the last example. I enjoy creamy desserts which are not too sweet. Meaning without commas and meaning with commas. I'd like you to do that practice at home, and we will begin when we start talking about this in class. We will check that one together to see if you understand without me telling you the answer in the video. Just to recap, we're going to look at our rules one more time. The form is the same as other adjective clauses. There is one thing that we should note. You can only use who or which. You cannot use that. So that is one rule that changes in the form. I'm going to put a little star here. One thing that changes in the form, but we still need our subject and verb. We still need our keyword. You can use who or which. You cannot use the word that in a non-identifying adjective clause. Know that in non-identifying clauses. Identifying has no commas, and that's because it functions as one unit. It can be the whole thing as the subject or the whole thing as the object. And non-identifying is with commas because it shows us that this information is not part of the function in our sentence. It doesn't actually work in our sentence. It's just extra information. It's not part of our noun, it's extra information about our noun. So go ahead and give that last practice a try, and we will talk about it.